good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to another BSI webinar. As some of us may know who are participating, this is the sixth webinar that we are running as part of a series of three different categories. I will also talk about that, but I'm quite glad that we have gone through the six sessions until now, and we will be having two upcoming sessions that will be starting in June. And the June 4th will be the last session that will be delivering as part of these, I can say, huge 8-session series. Okay, today's topic is supply chain resilience, another significant one. Those who attended the previous webinars, they may recall, or those who did not have the opportunity to attend, you can watch our recordings on BSI's website and the YouTube channel as well. But we have discussed about digital resilience. We have discussed about safeguarding our own people, the most significant resources. And now, of course, another significant aspect of resilience in uncertain times, in emergencies, in incident times, or in crisis times is supply chain resilience. As we know that the world is more connected than it is compared to maybe 50, 60 years ago. The approach at that time in 1950s, 1960s, the giant organizations at that time were not technology companies, of course, it was manufacturing and oil and gas companies at that time. And they were preferring a more approach to have the entire manufacturing within the organization from A to Z. But in today's world, we are working with smaller organizations in means of scale and governance, but larger supply chain networks. This is why supply chain resilience is a significant topic for business continuity purposes or coping with instance and crisis situations. All right, here is the housekeeping rules. Dear everyone, during the entire webinar in this upcoming 1 hour or 55 minutes, everyone except myself, obviously, will be muted. However, I would really like to collect your questions, because the first 30 minutes of this webinar will be the presentations, and then the rest of the 30 minutes will be about a Q&A session. During the webinar, we will be collecting your questions. You can use the question feature of GoTo platform, and then please rest assured, I will go through each of these questions and I will reply to as many as I can as the time permits. For any question that we will not have opportunity to reply, you will be receiving the replies from myself or other subject matter experts at BSI through email, thanks to support from our marketing team. Okay, so without any undue delay, let's kick off this significant session. But before that, I would like to present you the upcoming sessions, upcoming webinars as well. Here it is, dear everyone. As I mentioned, we are at the last phase of these three phases, three categories of resilience series. These three resilience categories involve 8 webinars, and we are at the last part of this series, part 3, lead with accountability and purpose. As part of that, the first webinar, which is today here to be presented by myself, will be supply chain resilience. But as I mentioned, in June, back to back, on June 3rd, we will have the social responsibility driven by governance in an emergency, a very significant topic that brings relevant international standards. And then June 4, we will have the last of this 8-session series, corporate governance in an emergency. The topics may look quite similar. However, the first one, session 7, social responsibility, will be focusing on an international standard, which is ISO 26000, and how we can maintain social responsibility, how we should not be forgetting as an organization our responsibility to society, even during the challenging times. The other one, the last one, is purely about governance, top management, senior management approach in an emergency. So these will be the two significant and interesting topics. I will be attending as a participant because one of my colleagues, a subject matter expert on these topics, will be delivering those 2 sessions. Okay, so here we are, the agenda. As you know, that is a short agenda because we will be presenting only 30 minutes to give more room to the question and answer part. So we will initially discuss about supply chain continuity management fundamentals. Dear everyone, we will discuss about what is supply chain and what makes SCCM, supply chain continuity management, different than conventional supply chain management, how they are related and how they are different. We will discuss about this. Following that, I would like to present you, in fact, two international standards on supply chain management, let me call it, because one of them is about purely on continuity management. That will be the focus for the second part of the agenda, ISO 22318. The other one will be supply chain security management, ISO 28000. I will also discuss about the differences between these two standards, but our focus today will be on this international standard, ISO 22318, under business continuity standard series. Okay, before we kick off, we would like to start with a poll question, dear everyone. That will also help me to understand the audience and also maybe to do some small tweaks during the presentation. So our poll question is, how mature is your organization's current approach to supply chain continuity management? A great one to start to help us to think some of the areas about how our organization approach to supply chain continuity management. So currently, the majority of the replies are very mature and well established, but we are waiting for the rest of the participants as well. More replies are coming through. We will wait a little bit more, and then, yeah, there are some also replies that says no formal approach in place, no dedicated approach, not an approach based on an international framework. That's what it means basically. Okay, great. Many thanks for your replies, dear everyone. So let's kick off our discussions with the first agenda. First of all, at the very first webinar of this series, we discussed about business continuity management. It was a good one to start with. I would like to start, for those who attended this webinar or had the opportunity to watch the recording, or those who did not attend this webinar or didn't watch the recording, I would like to start with explaining and maybe refreshing your memory on the business continuity terms and definitions. That's a good one to start, because that will help us for our supply chain continuity management approach and structure. Dear everyone, event is anything that happens. Any transaction between your organization and your downstream, upstream, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, we will discuss about these terminologies later on. Any transaction, any information sharing, or any tangible, intangible asset sharing is an event. The incident is, apologies, the incident is when, let's focus on that one, when there is a disruption in this transaction. So as you see, to call it a supply chain incident, we don't have to namely see any disruption to supply of goods and products and other intangible assets as well. If you don't have information communication, if there is a disruption that's happening between you and your supplier, this is also an unplanned event, which we call it an incident. Now, disruption is, dear everyone, this is literally, there is a disruption on the supply. The other one is, incident is the difference between them. Let's go through a scenario. You requested an information from your supplier. It can be updating a software from your technology supplier. It can be about the raw materials that needs to reach to your organization or to the port at a specific time. But you are not receiving any information, any reply back from your supplier. That's an incident. That did not cause yet a disruption to your supply chain. But a supply chain disruption is, dear everyone, when these goods, raw materials, intangible assets are not delivered to you as it is planned, mentioned in the documentations, in the contracts, in the service level agreements. That's a disruption. Emergency, dear everyone, is a case that will affect human life. So that can happen also in supply chain disruptions. That can be a side impact that we need to deal with. But emergency, widely, mostly used for incidents, disruptions that will threaten human life, or incidents and disruptions that would require relatively a more prompt action to be taken. Crisis is a type of instant and or disruption, we can say, but crisis targets the strategic objectives, reputation, or viability of an organization. So basically, crisis is life or death situation for an organization. Not every supply chain disruption may lead to that, but some of the supply chain disruptions may directly target organization strategic objectives, reputation, or viability, which we may call the supply chain continuity disruption a crisis. And in today's world, this is something that we will be quite familiar with. I will be providing two real life examples. I'm pretty sure one of them is very popular, it's globally known. The other one is not that much popular, but will help us to look from a different perspective of supply chain continuity disruptions. Coming back to this topic, I will be discussing about these two examples, and we will also discuss about if they led to crisis for some organizations, or if they stayed as a disruption level, not moving to crisis level for the organizations. And disaster recovery, dear everyone, again, quite relevant to our topic today. Disaster recovery is not relevant to, let's say, a manufacturing organization lost its production capability due to some defects on the production machines. This is not disaster recovery, unless it is relevant to an information and communication technology disruption. So when we call disaster recovery situation or the disaster recovery plan, it shall always be relevant to information and communication technologies. It is not relevant to natural disasters, as an example. So today's world, when we are talking about supply chain, of course, many people think about the tangible goods like the raw materials to be supplied, but a very significant aspect of supply chain is technology supply chain for intangible goods, for the operating systems that we are using, for the applications that are vital for our organization that we are using. And we cannot imagine a work day while they don't exist, they are not functioning. And for majority of the organizations, these applications, operating systems are supplied by well-known technology companies globally. So a disruption to them would affect hundreds of thousands of organizations simultaneously. So this is why disaster recoveries for supply chain continuity is this aspect. And as we mentioned in many of our training course deliveries, dear everyone, disaster recovery for many organizations are directly relevant to supply chain continuity management. So while we are talking about disaster recovery as part of a standard ISO 27031, it makes perfect sense to bring or to get influence to bring together ISO 22318 as well. Okay, so dear everyone, supply chain definition. Let's start with that. This is official definition from the relevant international standard ISO 22318. A very simple, short, succinct definition. Application of business continuity management to a supply chain. So we understand that supply chain continuity management is a subset of business continuity management. Some of us may say that, yes, of course, this is quite natural. This is something known. All these topics that you have mentioned, all these terms and definitions are subsets of business continuity management. This is not a right statement. For example, crisis management, dear everyone, cannot be covered entirely under business continuity management. There are intersections between business continuity management and crisis management. If you think it like a vein shape, there are intersections, but we cannot say big crisis management is covered under business continuity management framework. That's not the case. However, supply chain continuity management, as long as it is a business continuity disruption, is covered under business continuity management system. This is why organizations who already implemented maintaining and continually improving a business continuity management system based on ISO 22301 would have an advantage when implementing a dedicated approach on supply chain continuity management. Now, again, these notes are from the standard. This is why we would like to bring them to your attention. Dear everyone, there are some further elaborations here following the definition. Business continuity management should be applied to all the tiers of an organizational supply chain. For those who are not familiar, what does a tier mean in a supply chain? We will have additional information here and we will discuss about that. But basically, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 approach is about if you have a direct relation with the supplier, or this is, we used to call them lead suppliers for an organization, or these are sub-suppliers. So these organizations who are supplier to our supplier would have different tiers like tier 3, tier 4, etc. In practice, an organization usually would only apply it to the first tier. This is what we used to call lead supplier. The supplier, we have a direct relation. We have a direct contract between us to first tier of their suppliers and influence critical suppliers to apply supply chain continuity management to their suppliers. This is in practice, but this is a risk-based thinking, informed decision making, dear everyone. Now, we can think about that. A large organization with tens or maybe hundreds of lead suppliers would have, again, hundreds or maybe thousands of sub-suppliers. So how deep we will go in this supply chain when ensuring that all these suppliers have continuity management. In ISO 22318 or ISO 22301 business continuity management standard, we don't have any specific guidance on what should be the level organizations go to implement their supply chain continuity management. This is purely a decision that needs to be taken by the organization. However, we have guidance in this standard that talks about, some of us might be familiar, business impact analysis. Now, business impact analysis will help us who are the critical suppliers, lead suppliers. If we determine one of our lead or tier 1 supplier as a critical one, an organization may prefer to go and have a direct relation, direct monitoring, direct influence for tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers. But another supplier, tier 1 supplier, may not be deemed or labeled as a critical supplier as an output of our business impact analysis. In that case, dear everyone, we may only implement supply chain continuity management to the lead supplier, as we did not prioritize as a critical one. We may have a distance. We may not have a direct relation with tier 2, tier 3 suppliers of this lead supplier. So in order to make that informed decision, we need to follow a framework. We need to have a systematic structure. And rather than inventing the wheel, rather than discovering this structure on our own, we can follow the international practices. And this webinar will be talking about one of them, a strong one of them, ISO 22318 standard, supply chain continuity management guideline standard. Okay. Now, we are also having some exclusions I would like to discuss here. Customer management issues such as retention and impact as a result of new or lost client. Dear everyone, this standard, this international practice wants to keep its focus on supply chain continuity management. So if you think of an organization, we have a supply chain downstream, and we have production and service delivery to our clients. Standard says, don't go to that upstream level about products and services. Keep it in the downstream supply chain only. So this standard, whether it is relevant to a supplier or not, does not have intent to deal with customer management issues. This will help us to have a focus area and have, more importantly, SOD, segregation of duties. The other exclusion is supply chain activities within the organization. Internal suppliers within the scope of the business continuity management system should be identified as dependencies or interdependencies, like an internal supplier, finance generally, a human resources, procurement teams, facilities management, IT, information technologies, as an example. These should be identified as dependencies or interdependencies rather than calling them supply chain. Because when we are talking about supply chain continuity management, we are focusing on external parties, not the internal ones. However, business continuity management system has a more holistic approach. It says your suppliers, external ones, and dependencies or interdependencies, internal ones, are within the scope of business continuity management system. So this is why, dear everyone, these two customer-related services and internal suppliers are exclusions to ISO 22318 standard. So this is why when we are talking about a focused approach for supply chain continuity management, we will only have a focus limited to external suppliers. That's a very significant information to begin with. Okay. So these are the exclusions. Dear everyone, the fundamentals of supply chain continuity management. I would like to go through these 3 points by reading them because they are quite significant topics to know before we proceed to the standard. An effective supply chain continuity management enables the organization to avoid or minimize the consequence of disruption. First of all, just like we don't claim in a business continuity management system, we cannot claim the risks will be terminated, disruptions can be brought to zero. Despite these international standards, business continuity and supply chain continuity management international standards, despite their approach is a proactive one, a preventive approach, but there will be disruptions that we cannot prevent. These may not be in the influence of the organization, like some global events, COVID-19, the Suez Canal blockage, which we will discuss in upcoming slides. They are good examples of that. It was not under control of many organizations who are affected from these disruptions, right? So this is why supply chain continuity management helps us to have a preparation to minimize the impacts. What are these preparations? Supply chain continuity management business continuity plans, or embedding supply chain continuity plans within an overall overarching business continuity plan, but having a dedicated approach on supply chain continuity. Dear everyone, history has proven that to us, to the world, many times, multiple times. Organizations who have a mature business continuity management system would be affected from disruptions just like they don't have any preparation at all. How? Because of ignoring the significance of supply chain or suppliers within the business continuity plan, only focusing on our internal capabilities within the business continuity plan would lead to have these business continuity plans no influence on the disruptions. That's quite significant, dear everyone. This is why history has proven that to us. Business continuity management is a holistic approach, which should include supply chain continuity management. And what we are discussing in this webinar is maybe a wake-up call for some organizations. We need to have a focused approach for our supply chain continuity. Our business continuity plans may not be sufficient in that case, especially if you are working in an industry or an organization which is heavily relying on suppliers. So there can be conflict between supply chain continuity management and the objectives of supply chain management, a very significant topic, such as the need to reduce cost, avoid excessive inventory, etc. So our supply chain management, or many organizations may call it procurement management, may have a target to reduce the cost. But if you are bringing supply chain continuity management approach, of course, one of the resources that is needed will be budget, as an example. So basically, from a supply chain continuity management perspective, as a business continuity expert specialist, you are offering to have budget to establish a framework on that one, while the procurement team, supply chain management team, offering or having an objective to reduce the cost. Dear everyone, in that case, governance comes into the picture, if I may call it, as a referee. Governance, taking the accountability, may make this decision. This year or this decade, our objective is to reduce the cost as much as we can. So we are taking the risk. That is the standard language. We are taking the risk to face with any disruption relevant to supply chain without any preparation. This is an organizational, this is a top management decision, strategic decision for the organization, which will be justified for many other reasons. However, if organization does not have such a approach to accept high risks, then they need to implement supply chain continuity management as a control to reduce all relevant risks, which will bring cost on it. So this is why supply chain management, procurement management, and supply chain continuity management should be working in collaboration and needs to be governed by top management. SCCM seeks to identify those suppliers who can significantly impact the organization and ensure that the organization has implemented strategies and solutions to address these. We will discuss about what does a supply chain strategy, supply chain continuity strategy mean, but I would like to focus on identifying the suppliers significantly impact the organization. We call them prioritized suppliers. And yes, there is a methodology, which is quite an effective methodology to identify those prioritized suppliers. We call it business impact analysis, dear everyone. BIA, in short, would help to identify our prioritized products and services. So we will not have dispersed operations. We will not have a heavy cost of implementing and maintaining a business continuity management. The same approach, when we are applying for supply chain continuity management, like I mentioned very shortly a while ago, there may be hundreds of suppliers that we need to deal with. BIA, business impact analysis, will help us to identify the ones in the focus, the prioritized ones. So that's why it starts from that. You identify the prioritized suppliers, you implement your supply chain continuity management framework to these prioritized ones rather than covering all your suppliers. And these suppliers, prioritized ones, generally are the ones who have a direct impact on delivery of products and services of the organization. As an example, for a call center organization, a water bottle supplier will be considered as a supplier. But how significant it is to direct our efforts and invest on it to implement the supply chain continuity management. We can survive without this organization maybe a couple of days, couple of weeks, right? However, how critical a technology supplier for a call center organization, a software supplier for a call center organization. So when we weigh these two suppliers, we say that we have a limited budget. We cannot invest all our financials and time on supply chain continuity management. So we need to make it efficient while we are preserving effectiveness. We will be scoping the technology supplier for this call center organization rather than this water or other consumable goods suppliers. Okay, great. So here is another poll, the second of 3 polls that we will see today. Again, I and the rest of the team here wondering your opinion on this. The question is, which area represents the biggest supply chain continuity risk for your organization? A very interesting question, eye-opening question, and I believe we need to start by asking that question when understanding the importance of supply chain continuity management. Okay, we have the majority of the replies on cybersecurity and digital risks. Amazing, thank you very much. Because for all these years, when we were talking about supply chain security, supply chain continuity, people will be having a mindset of thinking about tangible supply, tangible goods supply. However, in today's world, maybe a heavy risk, high risks are happening on cybersecurity and digital risks or digital suppliers. Yeah, as anticipated, majority of us, thank you very much, dear everyone, for all the advice. Majority of us replied as cybersecurity and digital risk. Thank you very much for this. Okay, so let's proceed. Dear everyone, benefits of effective supply chain continuity management. Of course, better understanding of the supply chain dynamics, potential threats, and vulnerabilities. If you don't start this, in many cases, discovering the vulnerabilities, the weaknesses in our supply chain, we find them, we discover them as a coincidence. And some of these vulnerabilities can result to catastrophic threats, which we call them crisis. So supply chain continuity management as having a proactive, preventive approach, it would help us to get the early warnings, early signs. The other one is impact reduction through improved supply relationship management. As we discussed, we have the preparations. We cannot avoid all or any disruptions. All of the disruptions, we cannot avoid them. So the ones that resulted with a disruption, the instance resulted with a disruption, we will be prepared to cope with them. Improved disruption response, this is mainly about training our people, exercising them. So when there is an incident or disruption, they know what to do. They know from where they can receive the information. They know which parts of business continuity plans can be activated. Identification and mitigation of supply chain risk, yes. As part of our maybe enterprise risk management, if we can call it, we will have a dedicated supply chain continuity management risk registry. Improved due diligence and assurance, definitely, and competitive advantage for organizations, which can be used for a marketing purpose, telling the world that we have an established supply chain continuity management. It is based on the relevant international frameworks. Okay, supply chain disruption examples, dear everyone. We will be talking about a few things here. I am sure one of them is well known by all participants here today. The other one is not that much popular, but a very interesting one and quite relevant one for our participants today because majority of us marked cybersecurity and digital risks on the poll questions. So supply chain disruption examples, dear everyone. Let me go through that. COVID-19 pandemic was a wake-up call for especially multinational organizations which were relying on their only tier one suppliers. So as we have mentioned in the benefits part, supply chain continuity management work, implementation work will help us to have a blueprint of our suppliers. Tier 2, Tier 3 suppliers as well. Due to the comfort of working with them for many years, cargo prices from China to US have gone up to 18,000 USD, while before the pandemic the prices were in range of 2,300 to 3,000 per container. We are talking about like 6 times or more than 6 times increase in cargo prices for this specific example from China to US. So supply chain continuity management will also help us, dear everyone, not only with cope with disruptions, to cope with post-disruption impacts. Because the idea in supply chain continuity management is not to take the organizations to the, we call it temporary level, like minimum business continuity objective. At minimum, the target supply chain relations and delivery. But supply chain continuity management also talks about what we call recovery. Many of us know it as fully recovery. Going back to business as usual, BAU, or normal. So this is why, if this is the case, post-disruption, what is the framework? What is the roadmap to be followed to make a decision when we have such a high cost? This is part of supply chain continuity management framework. So a very famous example, this is what I meant. famous for everyone, I believe. The Suez Canal blockage, as some of us may call, yes, it's been, in fact, 5 years, almost exactly 5 years, right, this year. But it's like yesterday, because that was another wake-up call for the organization, such a significant one for the organizations. Dear everyone, Suez Canal blockage by Evergreen, in fact, it happened. And according to Lloyd's list estimated during the blockage, that's a significant one. The value of the goods delayed each hour was $400 million. We all know the importance of Suez Canal. We all know the significance for it, for the global logistics, for tangible assets logistics. And when this blockage happened for a couple of days, that was the cost to the world for each hour. That resulted with a tsunami effect by increased inflation rates, increased prices globally, etc. And this is something is not in the control of organizations. This is why a supply chain continuity management approach framework would help us to be prepared for disruptions which are not under our control as well. The other one is, this is the one that I mentioned, which is not as popular as the Suez Canal blockage example. Dear everyone, Target, for those who know, in the United States, it is a retail organization, a large retail organization, which is operating in every state in the United States. So this organization had a phishing attack. But the interesting one is this. This is relevant to digital supply chain. This attack resulted with millions of customers' credit numbers, their private information to be exposed. Of course, as a result of that, some of these customers of Target, they have seen deduction on their credit score, deduction on their credit limits, and some unlawful expenditures happened following that. Of course, that would also result with a reputational tarnishment for Target and some other following waves of impacts. But more importantly, when we look at the third statement here, the attack here, the breach here, was relevant to a supplier of Target. At that time, Target invested a huge amount of money to have smart heat, ventilation, air conditioning systems for all its stores across the United States. As it was a smart HVAC system, the vulnerabilities, cybersecurity vulnerabilities, was also accompanying this approach. And what happened is, it is later on found out that the attackers attacked to Target, not directly targeting the target, through their HVAC system supplier. They gained an access to these smart HVAC systems, and from there, they could access a huge amount of Target's information technologies doors. And of course, there are also issues that are happening with the Target as well, due to some open ports that allow easy access to suppliers and the attackers. But apart from that, the origin of the attack started from a supplier. So as we can see in today's world, dear everyone, digital supply chain risks are quite high because we are living in the most connected world it is compared to yesterday, just yesterday. So this is why cybersecurity and digital risk on supply chain is a growing risk for organizations. And supply chain continuity management does not claim I am here only for tangible goods. It claims that I am here for any type of supply chains that will be covering digital supply chain as well. Okay, so we are moving to the second part of this webinar, dear everyone. In fact, second point in the agenda before the Q&A session. As you can see on the screen, there are these three standards, relevant standards to ISO 22318. But I will be focusing on ISO 22318 standard, which is the supply chain continuity management standard. But apart from that, as we have just discussed, this approach, SCCM, is a subset of business continuity management system, ISO 22301. Risk management and informed decision making is a very significant part of supply chain continuity management. This is why risk management guidelines, as always, is another significant guideline standard. And ISO 28000, they are talking to each other, but they are not subset of any of these approach. We have supply chain security management. It used to be called supply chain security management, but now it's only security management systems. This standard is also a significant one for supply chain security perspective. But as I mentioned, we will focus on ISO 22318, which is the supply chain continuity guideline standard. Okay, here is what the standard looks like. ISO 22318 standard. We have these 4 guideline clauses, following clauses 1, 2, 3, the introductory clauses. Context of the organization, it always starts with understanding who we are. Business continuity management system prerequisites for supply chain continuity management. As you see, there is a huge influence of BCMS. This is why any of our participants or whoever listening to this recording, if you already have a business continuity management system implemented within the organization, it makes perfect sense to start at least considering implementation of supply chain continuity management if it is a priority, if it will be a significant risk management for your organization. And then what is an effective supply chain continuity management? We will discuss about that. We will discuss about strategies and solutions here. And the last one is mostly a check and act clause, maintenance, performance, and continued improvement of supply chain continuity management. Okay, so dear everyone, here is a supply chain model. This can help us to understand the downstream and upstream suppliers. So the upstream suppliers, dear everyone, here is our organization. Tier 1 inbound supply. We used to call them, as I mentioned, lead suppliers. The external supplier that we have a direct relation. And the other ones are tier 2. We may not have a direct relation, but these suppliers, we used to call them sub-suppliers, would have an impact on the continuity of our products and services. Causing a disruption on supplier A may cause a disruption on external supplier, which may cause disruption on the organization. So this is the chain, how it goes. However, as I mentioned, dear everyone, this standard, ISO 22318, excludes, it does not promise to provide a framework on the downstream, which is customer relations and our internal suppliers. Business continuity management system, as we just discussed, call the internal suppliers as dependencies and or interdependencies. But our focus here in this webinar and the relevant international standard is the upstream suppliers. So here is another, a more detailed supply chain model. We may have primary suppliers, which we call them in business continuity language prioritized suppliers, right? Even though secondary and tertiary suppliers can be as well priority suppliers, but we need to evaluate that as a result of business impact analysis. Testing services, design services for an organization, as an example. IT support, IT stationary catering can be tertiary suppliers. But like I mentioned, dear everyone, these have direct impact on products and services, as well as in today's world, digital supply chain capabilities may have a direct impact on organization to continue delivery of products and services. Okay, and what are the components of an effective supply chain continuity management? Dear everyone, identify strategies and solutions, assess suppliers' continuity compliance, establish contractual obligations, and review and update. Basically, what we see, I would like to quickly take you to the second, to the second before slide. As what we have seen in effective supply chain continuity management, we can call this clause 6 as the heart of this standard, the engine of this standard. These are the methodologies that will help us to establish an effective supply chain continuity management. But I am pretty sure that even those who are working on business continuity management, generally the questions are coming around this part. What do we mean with continuity strategies and solutions? These might be relatively easier to explain, but this one requires a more focus. And in this webinar, we would like to quickly have an overview on the strategies and solutions as well. Dear everyone, this is what the roadmap to supply chain continuity management strategies look like. We are using business impact analysis outputs. We understand the priority suppliers. On these priority suppliers, we are understanding the risks that require treatment to fix the risks or mitigate the risks or maybe increase the opportunities as well. Now, strategy is basically the risk treatment. Strategy is basically controls, but from a more strategic level. For example, we have a supplier, cloud service provider. Let's go with an example on digital supply chain, as majority of our participants were coming from that background, as I understood from the poll questions and answers. Dear everyone, you might be heavily relying on a CSP, cloud service provider. But as an organization that's a priority supplier, you have identified and analyzed high risks there. Your strategy is to sign a redundancy agreement apologies, with another cloud service provider, a local cloud service provider, let's say. If our main cloud service provider is disrupted, we will move our service to this, let's say, local cloud service provider. This is the strategy. But how we will migrate from one CSP to another one during a disruption, these details, these steps are what we call solutions. Warning these interested parties, transporting our personnel from A to B, switching our applications from cloud service provider A to cloud service provider B. These are called solutions. These solutions later on will become your business continuity plans. So that's the approach. That's a very significant diagram, significant information, dear everyone, to understand what is happening at the heart of supply chain continuity management. And business continuity management is not different. It's also following the same approach. Okay. Here comes the last poll question before we proceed and move to the question and answer platform. Which benefit of ISO 22318 or ISO 28000, one of them is supply chain continuity, the other one is, as you know, supply chain security standard, will be most valuable to your organization? Looking forward to your replies, dear everyone, before we proceed. Okay, we are receiving replies. Currently, majority of us replied as stronger governance and compliance. Thank you very much. Okay. Any other replies? Okay. Thank you very much. We are back to the scene. All right. Dear everyone, now we are moving to Q&A session. We are collecting some questions already. Thank you very much for all the questions that are asked. There are some interesting ones. Okay. Let me go with one of it here. The question is, it sounds interesting. What practical actions should organizations prioritize to improve collaboration and continuity between suppliers, logistics partners, and internal business functions? Okay, great. Dear everyone, first of all, we need to speak the same language with all our suppliers. The same language does not have to be something that you need to develop as an organization and share it with all your interested parties, downstream, upstream suppliers. International standards already established the language, the common language. This is why in our presentation also we mentioned it very briefly, but you will be seeing a further elaboration in ISO 22318 and relevant standards. Organizations are invited to influence their suppliers to use these international standards as a framework, so you can integrate your own supply chain continuity management with your tier 1 and beyond suppliers. So this is why one of the very significant approach in this collaboration is using the same framework. Implementation of that will differ as per the context of the organization. But in the fundamentals, you will be establishing the same framework. So what does that mean? You will know that your suppliers, tier one and beyond suppliers, will also have exercising. You will know that they also have a business impact analysis. Your organization may have the opportunity to see, as a result of business impact analysis, the services, the products delivered to my organization, are they considered as prioritized or not? Right. So that's a very significant one, to use a common framework that will bring all other organizations in the same ecosystem together. Okay, the other one is, let me see, how can standards such as 2231, this question has been asked during the webinar, that's amazing, from someone who knows the standards, and ISO 28000 support organizations in strengthening resilience and improving visibility across their supply chains. Dear everyone, first of all, these frameworks would help us to start from a proactive, preventive approach. What does that mean? It starts from a risk management approach. What are your risks in your supply chain? This definitely pushes the organizations. This triggers an effort to have a deep dive into understand what is happening in our supply chain. Because risk identification means identifying the vulnerabilities and threats. In order to identify vulnerability and threat for a supply chain environment, you need to focus each of your at least tier one suppliers. Focusing on tier one suppliers will take you to tier two, tier three, and beyond suppliers as well. So for some organizations, that might be a study, a work that is taking place for the first time ever. Okay, that was a great question. Thank you very much. I believe the time will permit for one last question here. We have more than that, dear everyone. However, as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we will reach out to the owners of the questions with the answers, replies from BSI subject matter experts. In your opinion, okay, what are the biggest challenges organizations face in maintaining supply chain continuity during disruptive incidents or crisis? Wow, amazing question. Not only my opinion, but I can say like a collective approach, dear everyone. The hardest part, once the disruption happened, our audience mentioned the disruptive incident, let's call it disruption or crisis arrived. One of the biggest challenge organizations are facing, or the regret, let me call it, not having exercising sufficiently in the past. Because we can see a chaos is happening in the organization, despite almost every detail is written in the business continuity plan or supply chain continuity plan. If we don't exercise our people, everything will be staying on the paper, on the documents. So this is one of the challenges that is happening. The other one is, of course, the part which is not under our direct management, suppliers. You can manage your core services to resume them, to implement recovery for them, but there is a significant amount outside of your core organization's core, which are suppliers. You cannot directly manage them, especially if it is a crisis that's affecting these suppliers as well. Rather than prioritizing your needs, your questions, they prioritize their internal communications. If your critical suppliers don't have a preparation to a crisis or a disruption, even you have a major business continuity management, the effectiveness of your own BCMS will be quite limited because of the poor preparation, poor support from your supplier. This is why, dear everyone, implementing a supply chain continuity management should be a holistic approach for your ecosystem. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We have more questions to be answered, but I believe the time to answer them in this live session may not be sufficient. Thank you very much for today. Yeah, definitely. We loved having you today. And thank you, everyone, for your time. If you need to reach BSI, here are the contact details, including myself as well. I am more than happy to reply your inquiries. Looking forward to have you in another BSI webinar. Thank you very much. Have a great day ahead.